This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and web development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 261, Jeff Geerling. Dun, dun, dun. Welcome to Talking Drupal. As you can tell by the show title, today we're talking about Jeff Geerling. And what better person could do that than Jeff himself? Joining us this week, if you couldn't guess yet, is Jeff Geerling. He's highly experienced in website and application scalability and performance, as well as design and plenty of other buzzwords and acronyms. He's known as Geerling Guy online and is currently the owner of Midwestern Mac LLC and a technical consultant, Ansible by Red Hat. He was a senior technical architect at Acquia from 2014 to 2019 and currently maintains Drupal VM. He's also a published author of Ansible for DevOps and Ansible for Kubernetes, and has a growing YouTube channel where he mostly talks about Drupal, Ansible, Kubernetes, photos, and tech. Jeff has been a guest previously on Talking Drupal in the episodes 105 talking about the Raspberry Pi and 186 as the keynote speaker at New England Drupal Camp.
Thank you for that intro. That sounds amazing.
It's funny because we're not only are we talking about you, but we're talking with you as well. You're it's not like we're gonna talk behind your back. You're gonna contribute.
No, I'm excited to be back. The first two experiences were great, and that is why I'm here a third time. I love this podcast.
Glad to hear. Joining us as usual this week are one of our co-hosts, John Picozzi with Umfing. What's new with you this week?
I'm still reading. So still reading the book, really loving it, getting excited about, that our episode with Jono. And interestingly enough, I was just reading the chapter I just read was actually talking about the Kubernetes community and, a lot of the way they've structured their community and a lot of the good stuff that they're doing to kind of build Kubernetes and get the community rolling. So it's interesting. It's interesting when you're reading something and you're like, hey, I know about that thing. So,
John, for the listeners who did not catch last week's episode, tell us about the book you're reading and why it's important for you to finish by mid-September.
Yeah, so I'm reading People Powered, by John O'Bacon, and the book focuses on building communities and focuses on companies that are building communities as well as organizations that are building communities. As somebody that's pretty heavily involved in the Drupal community and different community organizations, I thought it would be interesting to kind of read more about that. And again, I'm on sabbatical right now, so I'm just wrapping up week 2 here. So I got 2 more weeks to go. And my goal is to finish reading the book. I'm notoriously bad at reading. If you've been listening, you understand. And the goal is to finish this book by the end of my sabbatical in 2 weeks. But Steve gave me a little bit of a runway because we are having a show with the author of that book in mid to late September, I think it was.
I think it's the 24th.
And that gives me a couple more weeks to get the book read. But I'm still...
So what page are you on?
That's a good question.
Should be at least page 140. We said 70 a week.
Just over. Hey, it's only Thursday. I'm okay. Yeah, just over 115, I think.
Okay. So couple pages behind, but you're doing good.
Well, I mean, come on. I still got I got like a day and a half to finish those up. I'm doing just fine.
And what's new with you this week, Stephen?
Hey, so this week I did something that I didn't envision myself doing ever again.
It's interesting because I thought it was spam. Keep going.
I signed up for Facebook.
And I was like, Stephen came up as a friend because like, join request friendship from Stephen. And I'm like, Steve's not on Facebook. And then I'm like, he had one contact or one friend and it was his wife. And I'm like, like this feels fishy to me. But
so anyway. I signed up for a course and I'm taking online. It starts in September. And one of the benefits And features of the online course is that they have a private Facebook group to interact with the instructor and the other students. And it was killing me. It's the only thing about the course I was thinking, I don't want to take this because I don't want a Facebook account again. I deleted it 2 or 3 years ago. But I wanted to take this course, and it's a significant amount of money. So I feel like I need to get the best out of it by joining Facebook again. So I did. So I figured, Facebook has to have a way that you can basically lock yourself out so no one can even know I'm there. And I'll just join this private Facebook group and then leave. And within 10 minutes of actually creating the account, and the moment that I friended my wife, people started to ask me, request friendship like John did. And I didn't request anybody, and there's no way, a setting that I can find, maybe a listener can help me here. There's no way that I can see that you can say, I don't want to have anyone request me as a friend. It's either friends of friends can request you, or everyone can request you. And then my name shows up in places. It's crazy.
You're not going to accept my friend request?
I haven't accepted any yet. I have 3 friends, my daughters and my wife.
That's a no, John. I mean, I kind of went the other way. I actually just added the Facebook container extension that Mozilla put out for Firefox, which quarantines Facebook even further. Because I also haven't had Facebook in about 1.5 years.
Not to go down a rabbit hole here, but is the course, is it just an online course, or is it through some sort of university, or?
So it's an online course. It's not through a university. It's like, and so there's like an online element. It's like one of those courses where it's videos every day, and then once a week you meet with the instructor real time, go over Q&As, and then they have this. So my first piece of feedback clearly will be, get rid of the Facebook.
Get off of Facebook.
Why not? Yeah, why not have a Slack channel? Like, just build out Slack to.
Yeah, this is not a Slack channel kind of community, so it's not a tech course, so it's not that kind of thing. But
it's not a technical.
Yeah, so there's certainly ways to do this that is not Facebook, but it's free and it's easy, right? And it's marketing, so it's hard.
Yeah, and I mean, and if you're paying a significant amount for the course, they can invest in something that doesn't steal your privacy.
Can you tell us what the topic is?
Yeah, sure. It's a health topic. It's a course from a doctor that is a specialist in gut health, and the course is called the Plant-Fed Gut. So it's a health related thing.
I pictured Steven like making pottery, or like painting watercolors or something.
Making pottery over Facebook.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just throwing that out. Anyway,
if anyone is familiar with this book here, Fiber Fueled, it's the author of this book that is having the course. So it was something I was interested in, so I'm going to take it. But I joined Facebook, so it's been bothering me for the last few days. And I don't know why it's bothering me that bad.
So, Nick, what's going on with you?
So this week, I had an interesting experience, and it's kind of funny because we kind of touched on it a little bit before the show. I was actually just to eat lunch the other day, just browsing through some stuff, and I happened across a short video of one of Eminem's concerts, and he had an ASL interpreter at the front interpreting the lyrics as he was singing. And it got me thinking, because I know that different languages rhyme differently. So most languages rhyme, the end of the word sounds the same, it rhymes. But other languages, the middle of the word or the beginning of the word rhymes. But I was thinking, how do you rhyme?
Sign language is not a word-to-word translation.
Exactly. Well, that's part of it. But also, how do you rhyme in sign language? Because first of all, it's not word-to-word. And second of all, there's no sound that goes with it. So then I started Googling because I was curious, like, how do you rhyme in sign language? And I found a blog post with a video about this guy that teaches sign language that talks about what it's like to rhyme in sign language, because typically there isn't rhyming in sign language, but he talks about, like, the idea behind rhyming is that things sound the same and have similar rhythm. And so he talks about making a visual rhythm and making things look similar. And so I went to watch the video, and this was kind of the second revelation for me. It was an ASL video, but it had no sound. So usually when somebody's talking about a topic, even a topic like this, it's spoken and you can listen to it. And that's usually what I do. I'll throw up a YouTube video about something, listen to it in the background and get some work done. But he had, there were captions, but there was no sound on the whole video. So he talked about translating the, hey diddle cat and the fiddle into a quote unquote rhymed ASL nursery rhyme for 5 or 10 minutes with no sound. And it was just very interesting to me to, experience, to think about that. Like, it's something that, we really take for granted on two levels. One, you take rhyming for granted, and two, you take like just reading, like looking at a YouTube video for granted, because yes, you have captions on a lot of YouTube. I think our shows have captions, but if you're not hearing, you can't just throw the video up in the background and just kind of do something else. Like, when you're looking at a video, you have to give your full attention to it if you want to understand it, because you have to actually read what's happening. You can't, it's harder to kind of multitask visually, I think, when you're working on something. Whereas if I'm working on something, I'm listening to something, I can kind of just turn off what I'm listening to. And if I need to focus on like something that I'm working on, whereas, it was just very interesting to me where, just this little GIF of somebody translating Eminem's concert into ASL kind of turned into this little rabbit hole for me, and really just starting to appreciate like the other end of the other end of accessibility. I'm
not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. You are fun. You are at such a higher level than I feel like I'm at right now. Because literally, I would have watched that and been like, "Oh, look, it's Eminem in sign language," and then moved right on. And you were like, you went into it. You were like, "How do people understand rhyming? How does that work?" And like went down that rabbit hole, and that's amazing to me. I don't know. You're kind of making me feel dumb right now.
Don't feel bad. I think the point of this story really was, I think sometimes, we talk a lot about accessibility, and I think I had a similar revelation when we had Brian as our keynote speaker at NedCamp. It's one thing to make something accessible. It's another thing to experience something that is accessible from the other side of things. So that video was completely accessible to me, even though there was no sound, but I had to still experience it in a different way than I was used to. So that, combined with, the curiosity about the rhyming thing, that was, I think, what I really took away from that. I think sometimes, it's one thing to make things accessible. It's another thing to test them and make sure that you're experiencing it from an accessible perspective, because it makes you really appreciate, it makes you appreciate the effort that you have to put into it, but also appreciate how people are interacting with your media. And it, for them, it's not just, it's not just your website that they're interacting with, that's their life. So I just thought it was kind of interesting, and we'll have the link to the article in the show notes. So if somebody wants to take a look at that video and read that blog post, or dive down the rabbit hole further,
I'll also put the link.
Just something I thought was interesting.
You mentioned Brian's talk from NedCamp.
Oh, yeah,
I'll also link that in as well.
Very cool. And on that note, what's new with you this week, Jeff?
Well, today is my Dataversary. It's the 11th anniversary of my first date. And funny story about that. If you're listening to the podcast, you can't see it, but I'm wearing the same shirt that I wore on that first date with my now wife. And we have a tradition that we would go to a nice restaurant every year. And this year is the first year that we're going to have to break that tradition. But we're doing the second best thing and having our kids be in the basement watching a movie while I go get carry out, bring it home, and we're going to eat with a candle on the table. But it's not a real candle. It's a fake candle that just flickers. So as close to real as we could get.
Well, that sounds great.
It sounds like fun, but it's kind of funny because I always joke with kind of the opposite with my wife. When we started dating, after a month, she had a month anniversary. And then the second month, she's like, well, it's our second month. We have to celebrate that. and then the third month, and then by the fourth month, I'd asked her to marry me. And I figured it was like, well, at this rate, I'm going to have to celebrate an anniversary every month anyway, so might as well get married. But
that was the reasoning for getting married, huh? That's interesting.
No, it was just a little bonus.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know. I applaud you for the Dataversary. I think that's you know, I think now, especially nowadays, we need a little bit more to celebrate, and I think that's a great thing to celebrate. I'm gonna have to ask my wife when our first date was, because
this is the only reason I remember, is because we have this date every year.
There you go. Yeah, see, that's
my
fair.
first date. My first date was February 2nd, 2013. So I still remember my first date, but I don't celebrate it every year. It's close enough. I just celebrate Valentine's in February. It's close enough.
See, my wife actually doesn't like Valentine's Day. I don't know exactly the reasons for it, but so I think she makes up for it by celebrating these other little anniversaries.
That's nice.
Oh, that's interesting, because Colombians actually don't celebrate Valentine's Day either. They celebrate something called Amor y Amistad, which means like friends and love. And it's in September. And basically, if you have a date, you celebrate with your date, but if you don't, you celebrate with your friends. So I think it's actually, and everybody gets little gifts, and I think it's a much better holiday than Valentine's Day.
I like that, yeah.
To be honest.
Shouldn't we celebrate love every day?
Jeff, how long have you been married?
It'll be 10 years in a couple months.
So it's also impressive that you still fit into the shirt.
Well,
After
the funny
10 years
thing
of
is,
marriage, right?
we might talk about this a tiny bit later, but this shirt is actually a little large on me because with my Crohn's disease, when I met her, I was actually on a drug called prednisone. And if you've ever been on prednisone, you know it makes you puffy. Like your face gets puffy and you gain weight because you want to eat all day long. So it's like this shirt's a little bit baggy now.
Interesting. I'm not on prednisone, and I want to eat all day long. Anyway,
depends on the food.
Yeah, that's true.
So Jeff,
now you got me thinking about Italian, so I'm kind of hosed.
Jeff, the last time you were here, I think you had recently left Acquia. So what have you been doing since then?
Oh, all kinds of things. In the intro, you talked about a lot of them. My end goal is to be able to do more educational things. So teaching people about tech and product management and how to make good stuff and all those kind of things that I've learned over the years. But also, like for me, I know you can't be a really good person educating other people if you're not actually doing work too. So I'm doing a lot of time consulting with Ansible, which is owned by Red Hat, which is owned by IBM. So all these different layers, I'm currently working on a lot of integrations with Ansible and OpenShift and Kubernetes. And it's interesting. Red Hat is a company that is in the same vein as Acquia, so it wasn't a big transition. And in fact, there's a lot of former Acquians at Red Hat and vice versa, some former Red Hatters at Acquia. So there is actually a largest Drupal community in Red Hat because they use Drupal for some of the sites that they run, like opensource.com. So I get to interact with some of those people, and I still get to do some work with Drupal in Kubernetes, and that's been my primary focus the past probably year and a half now. But in addition to that, I'm doing my YouTube, and I'm working on writing more. I just published a second edition of Ansible for DevOps, and it's a lot of fun, but it also is a little more stressful not having a full-time job that gives you benefits and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's always different. You mentioned, I'm not sure really where this fits in the agenda, so I think I'll just bring it up now. We had Amazy on a couple episodes ago, and they mentioned Lagoon, which is like a Docker build and deploy system for OpenShift and Kubernetes. I was curious if you were familiar with that, and if you had any thoughts about kind of their philosophy there.
Yes, I am very familiar with it. In fact, I've had a lot of talks with Amazy, and I know that that's a company that I would probably enjoy working more closely with them, and they would probably enjoy me working more closely with them. So, someday maybe that could happen, maybe not, we'll see. But I am actually talking to them somewhat about a new series that I'm working on called Kubernetes 101. And in that series, one of the things that I would be using as a teaching tool is running Drupal in Kubernetes, because Drupal, it's not like a cloud native type of thing. Like it wasn't made for Kubernetes. It was made in the time before Kubernetes, but it does hit a lot of the pain points of building stuff in Kubernetes. So it's a pretty good example for it. And I've been talking with them about possibly having them be a sponsor for the series, or help integrate, like here's one of the ways that a company is actually doing this with Drupal, in addition to like, here's me running Drupal in a plain old Kubernetes cluster. So yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I just talked to them a couple days ago about that series and my plans for it, and getting an outline for it going.
Talking Drupal, bringing people together.
Yes, thanks to us.
One guest at a time. Speaking of your 101 series, can you tell us a little bit about your Ansible 101? What are the goals? Kind of what can people expect to get out of it?
Yeah, it was right at the beginning of the coronavirus lockdown time, and it was the week that we all found out that Italy was locking down, and I was thinking, like, there's a lot of people who are going to be sitting around at home, and they might or might not be able to be doing their full-time job, but they're probably going to have a lot of time on their hands, especially like for people with a family and kids. You might not have as much time, you might have less time, which is the case for me sometimes. But for a lot of people, you have a lot of time available, and instead of wasting it, maybe they could learn something, and it'd be fun to do it together. So I decided to start live streaming a series teaching Ansible from the ground up. And it was right after I started doing my Drupal migration live streams. And you might notice the video quality if you're seeing a screenshot of the video or the video itself. It's nice and sharp and things. That's because I spent a bit of time trying to get a good live streaming setup, and I've put a video up on YouTube on my channel about that setup, and a blog post, which hopefully will be in the show notes. But anyway, I did that for Drupal, and then I was like, I already have this set up, and I have a book about Ansible, and so why not just do a series on YouTube live teaching people how to use Ansible during the whole coronavirus thing. So I think it was 15 episodes or 16 episodes, talking about everything from like the first day with Ansible, connecting to a server, to managing many servers and deployments and applications with Ansible, managing instances in Amazon and DigitalOcean, things like that. So it was really well received, and I still get a lot of views and a lot of people emailing me about it. And that was also the impetus for me getting a second edition of my book. I actually rewrote 5 chapters of the book entirely based on feedback from Ansible 101 and some things that I found were like, yeah, you could do this better. Because when I wrote the book, it was 2014. The world changes a lot in 6 years.
6 years. Wow.
Jeff, is there a place for Ansible for someone who just wants to manage their local development environment?
Of course.
And move to, maybe have multiple machines, or get a machine set up quickly. And do you cover that in the course?
In the course, I mention it. I don't cover that topic in particular, because I think that's, for most people, that's not something that they do out of the gate. But once you start realizing you have to install like 300 different things to be productive, especially in today's world, with you have a front end framework and your back end framework and this thing and that thing and all your documentation stuff. But I do have a project called Mac Dev Playbook on GitHub. And that's what I use to configure my Macs. I now have a Mac that I use as my primary development workstation, a Mac that I use for backups on my home network and build processes. And then I actually have a Mac it's at Mac Stadium. They actually are letting me use a Mac for my CI processes. So I manage all 3 of them with that playbook, and it makes sure that all the software is the same, all the versions are up to date, and all my configurations are the same between all my computers.
Jeff, you may have said this and I may have missed it, but I just want to clarify, all of your series or your 101 classes, where can people find those and watch them, sign up for them, whatever?
Those are all on my YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and search for Jeff Geerling, or if you search for Ansible 101, or I think even if you search for the word Ansible, my series comes up towards the top of the search results, for now at least. YouTube's algorithm changes by the week, and you never know what's going to come up. But you can also go to my website, jeffgeerling.com, and it has links to my YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, Not well, it has a link to Facebook, but I don't really use Facebook. So
can you expand a little bit on, obviously if they're on YouTube, they're free for people to watch. Why?
Yes.
Why post this information for free versus doing a class or kind of walled gardening it, so to speak?
There are two main reasons that I like. One is that I've always gained so much from all the free open information. And the Drupal community was what brought me into open source, and the fact that almost everything that is in Drupal is free and open and public, and you can find it online. When I got started with open source, I actually read a book called The Cathedral and the Bazaar, and I recommend that to anybody who is thinking about the different ways to do open source or project development in the open versus closed source and things like that. And the idea for me is I want to put everything I do out there. There's very little work that I ever do that's actually proprietary. Like, for instance, I have server check-in and hosted Apache Solr, two services I run. There's a few custom modules, mostly related to payments, that I don't have open source. But like for server check-in, I wrote a ping library and an HTTP library that I use for it, and a Node app and things like that. Those are all open source as well. And I like doing that because I figure that many eyeballs makes bugs more shallow. When you get more people to use and see your work, it can make it better and help you evolve it in ways that you never even imagined. But also, it helps me to figure out more creative ways to make money for a living than just selling a course and limiting the audience. So the Ansible 101 series has been viewed something like 800,000 views for those videos so far. And I'm hoping that it gets up into the 1 million, 2 million over the next few years, because I made them to be more evergreen type content. And same thing with Kubernetes 101. And I do get a small amount of ad revenue, maybe a few $100 a month. It's not something that I'm going to be like, I can quit my job and do this. But it's enough that it makes it worth keeping them up and doing them. And it gives me a few bucks to get a new camera every couple of years and get some accessories and replace batteries, things like that. So, but Jeff, yeah, I just love to do my work in the open.
And did you say there was a private Facebook group for that course as well?
There's no private Facebook group. That is the reason I actually had been off Facebook for 3 years, and I had to get back on because there was a private Facebook group for a neighborhood thing that it's like in the before times, we could talk to each other. In the after times, everything moved to Facebook group, and I was like, okay, I'll get back on there. But like with you said, Stephen, like within a second of signing up, all of a sudden I had 5 or 6 friend requests. Yeah. And I was like, how is this even possible? And I clicked on it, and it showed me like 300 people I knew. And it's like, how does it already know everything about me? I signed up like 3 minutes ago. Yeah. And my guess is that Facebook
they don't actually delete
anything.
Yeah, of course not.
So, ironically, based on my update, I am going to ask you a question about your books, but I got to have 4 weeks off to read one of them. If I had 4 weeks off, an additional 4 weeks off, and I wanted to read one of your books, which one should I read?
Well, Ansible for DevOps just got a complete second edition, and there are something like 1,100 changes since the first edition. And they're all tracked on the book's website. And if people buy it, if you go to ansible4devops.com, that has links to Amazon, LeanPub, and iBooks. Nobody buys it on iBooks. I don't think anybody uses iBooks. But LeanPub is where I prefer, because I can put small updates on LeanPub all the time. It lets me publish small updates to the book whenever I want, and people can always download them. They're DRM free, so you can put them on whatever devices. And I did 23 small updates to the book before the second edition. So anybody on LeanPub could always get those. And I would update the book content on Amazon as well. So if you bought the book edition 1 a few weeks ago, you would have gotten all the 23 smaller updates. But the problem with Amazon is you can only update it. You can only update the publish date if you do a new edition. And a new edition triggers a new ISBN. It deletes all your old reviews, and it's a new search result. So it's really hard to do updates on Amazon. So again, I recommend, if you want to buy a book like this, buy it on LeanPub, where you can get the updates free forever and not have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. But that book, I put tons of work into, probably probably way more hours than it's worth, but it has sold pretty well. And I actually had a promotion during the Ansible 101 series. For the first month, I gave it away free to help people who are doing the series to have the book kind of as a companion. Ansible for Kubernetes, I'm still working on it. It has a lot of valuable content already, but it's a little rough right now. I haven't done an editorial pass on it, and I only have like 5 chapters out of about 8 or 9 that I'm going to do. And those 5 chapters have a couple sections that are still, all the text is to do. So,
and Ansible for Kubernetes has not been released yet?
It's available on LeanPub, so you can actually buy it while I'm writing it and see all the updates. But it's not available on Amazon because Amazon doesn't let you, again, once you publish it, you can't ever update that date unless you do a new edition. So there's no real way of giving access to a book before you write it unless you do review copies. And that's also a weird process. So
it's interesting that such a technology forward company would have such an antiquated, very, very print book centric way of delivering that content.
Yeah, I really wish Amazon would up their game there.
Yeah, I mean, they're all their tech stuff is on the back end, coming up with names for their new services. None of it is on their website anymore.
In our continuing efforts to connect people, I'm sure Jeff Bezos is a listener. So Jeff, reach out to Jeff, and he'll help you.
Yes,
he'll help you.
And if he wants me to if he wants to put me on one of his rockets, I would be very happy to do that.
There you go. Win-win.
So, Jeff, you are also the maintainer of Drupal VM. I think the last time when we spoke, you said you were kind of stepping away. If I remember correctly, you were stepping away from that project and trying to close it down. But that project still looks pretty active and is actively maintained from what I can see. I am still an active user of it. So what's going on with Drupal VM?
Yeah, so I'm maintaining it, but I'm not. I actually just today I committed an update to remove a feature that's been old and stodgy and not really needed anymore. I still use it here and there for some things, so I'm still maintaining it, but minimally. I'm not. There were a few ambitious goals that I had a couple years ago, and I was like, that would be like 10 or 15 hours of work. Probably not going to do those things, and I'm not going to do any big re-architecture, but there is a lot of value in having Drupal VM around for some instances when you need more customizability or when you need features that virtualization gives you that Docker containers don't. But for most people, a Docker-based solution like Lando or Doxel or DDEV or Insert, whatever other project here, there's like 8 of them that are very popular and about 300 that are less popular. And I actually was in a session at DrupalCon Global. It was called Local Dev Environments Panel, I think, and maybe we can link to that in the show notes as well. That panel was with the maintainers of DDEV and a maintainer from Lando and Doxel, I think. And we're going to do it again for DrupalCon Barcelona, which I think is also going to be virtual. And hopefully we'll have even more maintainers there. But we're basically talking about what are all the differences, why would you choose one or the other, that kind of thing. And the main thing is Drupal VM is not as simple and quick to get started with, but it still is useful for some use cases. What I like to say is it's like the 18-wheeler truck versus a Lamborghini or a Tesla or something. It's a little more beefy and stodgy, and you can't run it in certain environments as easily. But on the flip side, it can do some things that the other ones can't, and can do your heavy hauling if you need to have like customized varnish configs and specialized Solar setups and Elasticsearch and things like that.
Does it not support a Docker implementation?
It does have a Docker container. Okay. It is the hackiest Docker container thing in the world. It works, but it's super hacky. And I used to use that for some CI testing for some of the Drupal modules and projects I maintained, but actually switched to just using custom Docker container that I built because now I actually do some of my CI testing on Raspberry Pis. So I have a specialized Drupal image that works on ARM processors that I maintain and use for that now.
Interesting. Switching gears a little bit here. You've mentioned your health a couple times on the podcast, and you're very open on your blog. How has your health been recently?
It's been interesting. Right now I have this weird fever, and I am officially categorized as having a fever of unknown origin. And every month since June, this fever has come back, and it's like 103, 104 degrees.
Oh, wow.
And each time I'm like, oh, time to go to the ER again. Go in, they do every test I've ever heard of, and then a few more. And then the fever goes away, and then I go home, and they're like, you still have a fever of unknown origin. So we're looking into that. And it's one of those things when you have an autoimmune disease like Crohn's, it could be one of 500 different things. And they've done tests for 500 different things. Every time I go in, I'm like, I come in with a full body of blood, and then I come out with about 2 pints less because they're every morning the nurse comes in and she's like, all right, I'm going to take 12 vials. And I'm like, 12? Seriously? They're like, keep squeezing your hand. So yeah, I've had better days with my health, but you persevere. And the thing is, I like to tell people, with my Crohn's, I've had some really low lows, but like right now I'm feeling good. So this week I've been doing every little project I can. I play a game with my kids, and I go outside and I take walks and things. So when you're not in that rut, you have to do more and do good. Yeah. And some people are like, how are you so productive? It's like, well, I know that I have to get these things done now, because in a few weeks I could end up, getting sick again. So that is my philosophy on it.
I have to say that fever of unknown origins sounds so much like a Rats of Unusual Size type Princess Bride.
That's what my brother said when I texted him the acronym. It's an FUO.
Yeah, sounds like that. So hopefully that improves. They find out what's going on. It's always tough, and especially now. Like normally, going to the ER is always stressful, but these times it's more so. I mean, doctors are more stressed, and it's a much more harrowing. You're not usually worrying about catching something when you go to the ER.
Yeah. The first time I went in, because I had a fever, they were like, you could have COVID. And now I've had 4 COVID tests, all negative. Yeah. But the first time I went in, every time anybody would come, you would hear all this commotion outside the door. Then the door would open, and there'd be a doctor. He'd have 2 masks, a face shield, a full body plastic thing, and 2 layers of gloves, and all this stuff. And it's like, once the negative test came in, they didn't have to do all that. But it was like, they're taking it seriously. And it's, I kudos to all the doctors and nurses out there who are dealing with everything, because they're putting themselves at risk. And, I thank them for helping me, because they nurses especially always help me through these times, because they most of them, at least almost every one of them, has been super positive and friendly. So thank a nurse if you know a nurse.
Obviously, if you're watching the video right now, Jeff's video looks great. His audio is good if you're listening to the audio. This is partially because we talked about you doing these, one-on-one or 101 series and whatnot. But you're also doing more YouTube recording, right?
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I've been on YouTube since 2006. It's funny, I actually started on Google Videos, which was before YouTube, before Google actually owned YouTube. So I had like 2 or 3 years on Google Videos, and then they just disbanded it. And I'm like, okay, I'll go to this YouTube thing. So I moved some of my videos that were on Google Videos to YouTube. And for years, I would just throw up a random video, something that I was working on. And I never really cared about growing my channel or audience or anything like that. But I realized that I've done a ton of video work in my life. When I was in grade school, my dad had a shoulder VHS camera, and I would do recordings with that.
Oh, I had one of those.
Yeah, they were so fun. I actually watched the Star Trek 4. I watched the whole thing in the teeny tiny black and white viewfinder with an earphone in, because my parents were watching a movie on a TV, and I was like, I want to watch Star Trek 4. My dad got it VHS, so I watched it on that. But my dad got one of those little
right there.
Yes. It's still my favorite Star Trek film, even though it's probably not the best one by any objective measure. But I just have the fond memory of I saw it on that little teeny tiny camera. But anyway, my dad bought one of the first mini DV, or it was an i1394 or whatever, Firewire camera, digital video cameras, way back when they were pretty new for consumers, at least. And around the same time, I bought a G3. It was the first computer that was new that I had ever owned. And I had saved up a lot. This was pre-high school. And I bought the G3. I had my dad's camera. I found, I forget what the software was back then. It wasn't one of the ones that's still around today, one of the nonlinear video editors. But I started just having fun, doing fun random videos. For some of my class assignments, I was the nerdy dork who like turned in a 10-minute video instead of a paper report and got an A+ because the teacher was like, you went the extra mile. So anyway, I did all this video stuff. And so I kept doing that through high school and college and helping with the local public access program. And I figured this year, earlier in the year, I was like, I have all this equipment through the years that I've acquired and I have the knowledge. So why not start trying to put that together and make actual good videos on YouTube? Because in the past, I would just kind of like set my phone somewhere or set a camera somewhere and talk to it. But now I have lapel microphones and this microphone that if you're watching the video, you see it's a studio, like a radio broadcast microphone. And I started kind of leveling that up and doing some more videos and trying to be somewhat regular. This health thing has kind of squashed that. I was trying to do a video every week, and I actually have 5 more videos kind of in the can. I just need to do editing, but that's the part that takes the longest. So if you want to see some of the cool stuff I'm working on, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Again, it's Jeff Geerling on YouTube. And
hit the
I should
bell.
have some more stuff. Yeah, hit the notification bell. Click that subscribe button. All those wonderful things. I hate.
You could do that for Talking Drupal too, by the way, if you want
Yes.
to. I don't think we've ever said that.
I mean, everybody listening should be subscribed. If you're not subscribed, I don't know what you're thinking. But
Heard it here first, folks.
Jeff,
Yes,
since your increase in frequency and quality, have you seen an increase in your channel subscriptions over the past 6 months?
Yeah, you know what's funny is the video that I didn't spend the least amount of time on it, but I spent less time on a couple of these videos talking about Raspberry Pi things. And it was mostly just, I love Raspberry Pi stuff, and sometimes I like talking about it. And I was like, I'm going to do a blog post, and I'm like, this would make a decent video. So actually, for a different project, I actually bought a small teleprompter for my camera. And so I just took the blog post and edited a tiny bit, and I wrote a thing about the 8 gigabyte Raspberry Pi that had just come out. And that video got like 200,000 views in a day or two. And somehow I struck YouTube algorithm gold. And after that, all my Raspberry Pi videos started getting a lot of algorithm attention. So I got tons of subscribers after those. The Drupal videos maybe got me a few hundred subscribers. The Ansible videos got me a few thousand, but those Raspberry Pi videos took me from, my goal this year was to get to 5,000 subscribers. I came into the year with like 3,600 subscribers. And I'm now up to 43,000 subscribers or something.
Right.
It was only like 2 weeks. I went from 3,000 to 20,000 subscribers.
Yeah. 42.6 versus Talking Drupal, who has 900. So there's some comparison for you.
All
Jeff.
you have to do is get the same camera I use, and then it'll all be good, right?
This is Talking Raspberry Pi. What are you talking about?
So to be
Talking
honest,
Raspberry Pi Kubernetes clusters.
To be honest, Jeff, that's how I recognized you on YouTube doing stuff. Is I was looking up something on a Raspberry Pi, and I could not believe there was a video of yours sitting there, and it looked different than videos I had seen in the past of yours. And I'm like, wait, he's doing something here. Then I jumped over to your channel and said, okay, he's putting some time, effort, and money into this.
Yes.
I could see.
He's like, I know that guy.
Yeah. I think I sent you two guys
amazing.
a link. Yeah,
A lot of people, like there are definitely some YouTube personalities who just set up a camera and talk to it, and they rely on their good looks and charm and things, and they don't have to do much work. But it's incredible amount.
We're missing the good looks.
Well, if you don't have that, you have to work on other things like I do. And it's a lot of work. I actually, so a couple of years ago, I made it a goal, just a personal goal, to try to make myself a better speaker in general. Because I go to conferences. I did the keynote at NedCamp, and that was awesome. I was so happy to do that, and I'm still appreciative of you guys giving me that opportunity. And so I actually worked with a couple people to kind of give some of my recordings, and then they gave me feedback, and also like the structure of my videos and my presentations and things. And one of the things that they really told me was, inflection is good and trying to be more personable and happy and smile and things. But the main thing was find a story and make it relatable. And so that's what I'm trying to do with my videos and things. I try to make it so that instead of, and not a story like, here's a recipe, let me tell you the story about my grandma cooking it for me. And then like 30 minutes later, you get to the recipe, but more of a story of here's what this is. Here's why it impacted my life. Here's how it'll impact your life. And here's how to do it. And then isn't that awesome? That kind of thing, so that you can make it more personable, more interesting, and make that person feel like they're part of it. And, everything else is kind of stemmed from that. If you look at my videos from this year, the earlier videos, you can see I'm, especially on the teleprompter, you can see me reading kind of robotically. And I think I'm doing a little bit better, but it's a lot of work. If someone else wants to do this kind of stuff, don't just expect to buy a couple things and have the gear and start doing it. It takes practice. It takes time. The editing it takes 10 minutes to edit 1 minute of video at a minimum. So,
oh, wow. We've talked a little bit about Raspberry Pis, but I was going through your blog earlier today and I saw something. You're the only person I know that has used an RTLSDR besides myself. And I am so curious what you use it for.
Yeah, I have a blog post. If you go to jeffgeerling.com and search for RTLSDR, what you're talking about is a software-defined radio. And I don't have it on my desk right now, so I can't show anybody seeing the video. But it lets you use a hardware device that picks up radio signals, and software can control the frequency and modulation and things like that. So you can pick up AM radio, FM radio. You can even pick up satellite imagery. Some satellites broadcast on radio spectrum, and many other things that are interesting too. But the funny thing is, I've always wanted to buy one of these little software-defined radio kits. But the thing that inspired me to finally actually do it was the MLB. Oddly enough, they have all these restrictions and blackouts. I just wanted to listen to a baseball game, and I found out that you can't subscribe to MLB at bat or whatever because it's blacked out in your home city, so you can't watch your home team. If you pay them money, they don't let you watch your home team. I was like, that's stupid. Okay, so what's my other option? I could pay like $80 a month for a cable plan. Nope, not going to do that just to watch a couple ball games. And I was like, well, my radio station plays it. This is awesome. So I was like, in my car, I can listen to it. And at home, I don't have a radio anymore because who has a radio? So I was like, they have this online radio. So you pop open their online player and it's blacked out. And you're like, I can hear it on my car. Why can't I hear it on the same exact radio station on the internet? Apparently the MLB has blackouts on online playing. Who knows all the crazy reasons? I guess maybe people set up repeaters or something, but it's like, it's audio. You're not going to like make a ton of money off the audio of a ball game. I mean, maybe some people do, but you can record audio.
With the blackout, you might.
Yeah. So anyway, it was crazy. I just wanted to listen to the ball game. So I bought this thing and found out a way that I could stream the radio signal, which is not blacked out because it's radio and it's public. And I could stream that to my iPhone anywhere in the house. So I could be like working on a project and listening to the ball game. So it's interesting. Cool. My dad is actually a radio engineer, and I bought him one for his birthday this year. So he and I are probably going to do some fun things. I actually have some plans to incorporate him into my YouTube channel as well. So
okay,
again, subscribe and you might see some cool Geerling father-son projects coming soon.
So you can actually antenna? Did you need a special antenna?
Yeah, the antenna comes with the device usually.
Yeah, I'm actually in the place in St. Louis. I'm like surrounded by towers. I'm in the highest point in the metro area of St. Louis. So there's 3 towers right by me, and I can pick up almost anything. But if not, you might need a little bit better antenna than comes with the kit.
The interesting thing too, though, is you can get far more than just radio signals. So I actually use it for my home automation to read 433 megahertz devices because those are the cheapest ones. So like you get an accurate weather device remote, that's like $5-10.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can put it on your weather station, but then it's not included in your home automation. So nothing's encrypted. So it just feeds it into MQTT and then my system just ingests that. And I'm also the thing that
the cool things you can do with it for sure.
The thing I'm trying to figure out is if you can easily listen to more than one frequency, because I also want to use it to grab my because I have a smart meter for my gas and my electric, and I think my water. And so I'd like to get that information in without having to look at it as well. But I'm not sure if I'd have to like reboot it to change the frequency or something. But yeah, you're the only person I've ever seen that even knew what they were. Never mind played with it. So I was curious to hear about that.
Jeff, you're gonna have to start a Facebook group so that you and Nick can talk more about this.
Facebook is not open enough for me.
There you go. Right. Bringing it back full circle here to the Drupal front. I know you got a lot of different stuff going on, but you're still in the Drupal community a little bit. What are your thoughts about Drupal 9 and the future of Drupal?
I actually just wrote a blog post yesterday titled, "Did Breaking Backwards Compatibility Kill Drupal?" And no, Drupal's not dead. It didn't kill Drupal, but one of the things I've learned on YouTube is as much as we all hate it, good titles will generate traffic and discussion. And so sometimes I do use a little bit of clickbaity titles, but it's not because I hate you. It's because it's kind of necessary in today's world of Google algorithms and YouTube and things like that. But in it, I talk about the fact that there is a decline in the overall amount of Drupal usage. And it's not just in the Drupal.org numbers, but if you look at the companies, the smaller companies that do Drupal work, there's been a decline since Drupal 8 was released. And I talk about some of the reasons why that happened and some of the things that Drupal has done that's much better now. But the point that I'm trying to make is it's especially not to say like, oh, Drupal's terrible and all that stuff. Some people I think are just out there bashing Drupal saying, oh, everybody should just go to Backdrop and abandon Drupal entirely. It's only for enterprise and things. But that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is Drupal had for years a reputation of not being a major backwards compatibility breaking system. And that all changed with Drupal 8. And I think that at this point, the lessons are being learned. An upgrade from Drupal 8 to 9, the hardest part of that was actually getting composer dependencies fixed. There were no module issues that I had. There were no theme issues. And it was the easiest Drupal upgrade I've ever done. So Drupal 9, and I think Drupal 10 will be the same way, has been a painless upgrade. But Drupal 8 was such a pain that I think we're still in a weird state right now where Drupal.org is still on Drupal 7. There's so many people and so many companies that are still on Drupal 7 that I think will still be bleeding off a lot of those users who never made that Drupal 8 transition. And I agree with a lot of people that Drupal 8 is a lot more fun to develop for and a lot more the features it comes with built in, especially like Twig for me, who my original role was a front-end themer. Twig is 1,000 times more interesting and easy to use than PHP template was. But there were so many changes that I think some people just kind of give up, or they don't really want to make that transition and migration because it's just as hard to migrate to some other tool like WordPress or whatever other tools out there that they might be considering. So the blog post was less in the vein of I want to diss on Drupal and more in the vein of here's something that I think objectively we can all say we did some things that were not in the best interest of the community in that release. How can we learn from it? How can other people learn from it? If WordPress ever wants to modernize its code base, what are some ways they can do it without having the same kind of consequences that we had? Because again, we're all open source communities. And the best thing would be is if the rising tide lifts all of our ships and not, just WordPress or just Drupal or just one of these other systems out there.
So you heard it here first, folks. Drupal is not dead. It's just different, but better.
Well, thank you for joining us, Jeff. As usual, it's been a pleasure and very interesting. If our listeners wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way they could get in touch?
Go to jeffgeerling.com and there's links to everything there. Yeah, I'm always checking Twitter and other things. So if you ever message me anywhere that I am, I will probably see the message within some amount of short, day-long period.
Also, jam that subscribe button, right?
Yes.
Is that what the kids are saying these days?
I told my kids, smash that subscribe button, tickle the notification bell. Now they say that. I was doing it as a joke to my wife, and they heard that, and now they're always like, Daddy, you should tickle the notification bell.
And John, where can our listeners reach you?
You can find me on all the major social networks at John Picozzi, and you can read a new blog post that I wrote about tips for remote presentations on umthink.com/insights.
And how about you, Stephen?
Always find me on Twitter at Stephen Cross with a PH.
Also on Facebook now.
And you can find me pretty much everywhere at NixVan, NICXVAN.
Thanks, guys.